Welcome to Taiwan Talks, covering the latest global news from a Taiwan perspective. I'm Betty Chen. Following Wagner's failed coup, China's Xi Jinping is increasingly concerned over a possible rebellion by the PLA. Prior to the commemoration of PLA Day on August 1st, notable leadership changes occurred within the PLA rocket forces, including the replacements of both the commander-in-chief and the political commissar. Additionally, Qin Gang, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, remains absent from public visibility without an official explanation. Considering these, what are the challenges confronting China's domestic and foreign policy? And how should the United States and Taiwan strategically address these developments? Joining us today are Vincent Chao, Taipei City Councilor, and Wen-Ti Sung, Atlantic Council Global China Hub Non-Resident Fellow. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show. So let's start with today's discussion. Vincent, the restructuring of the PLA's rocket forces has been attributed to the Wagner mutiny in late June. And what are Xi Jinping's concerns and what aspects of the military does he want to assert control over and why?
So I'm not convinced it's 100% due to Wagner, and I'm not convinced that there is such a thing as a rebellion within the PLA, but I am convinced that the actions that we've seen in terms of leadership changes show a lack of confidence in the PLA, particularly its rocket forces. And so we have to say that this would be one of the first times we've seen not only a commander of a certain missile force or a certain army unit be changed with the political commissar at the same time. I mean, the political commissars are a leftover remnant of the Soviet era, but their job is to ensure loyalty to the CCP. And so normally we see a continuation of the political commissar system, even if we have changes in commander and leadership. But this time we saw both. And so I think there's two potential reasons for this, and they could be both, or it could be one or the other. The first one is that Xi Jinping has a lack of confidence in his rocket forces. Now, the rocket forces are really one area of the military that has been sort of underestimated in recent years. We focused a lot on the PLA's modernization in terms of the Air Force, Navy, Army, but really actually the fastest area of modernization has been their missile forces. And the idea that you've gone from 20 ICBM launchers, fixed launchers across China, to now the fact that you're building 300, to the fact that you're going to achieve parity with Russia and the US in terms of ICBMs and nuclear forces by 2035, the fact that you've built up really an effective triad of deterrence is really unheard of in terms of, and unprecedented in terms of this military buildup. And so my first point is that as the rocket forces engage in these sort of actions in terms of their reforms, maybe Xi Jinping doesn't have the requisite amount of confidence in the leadership there. That's one area. Mm-hmm. The other area is to show symbolism, that no, the rocket forces will not sit idly by while Xi Jinping continues to exert pressure over Taiwan, and that there would be a role for them to play in such a scenario. So it could be either or, but certainly I think at this time what the international community wants and needs is clarity. Because, I mean, as a responsible nuclear power, what you're supposed to show is that you're able to manage these weapons of mass destruction responsibly, and so far China hasn't been able to do that.
You mentioned loyalty. Do you think that lack of loyalty from the rocket forces can be another issue?
Well, it certainly could be, but again, we just don't know. But the fact, again, is that you have a double leadership change right at the top echelons of the rocket forces, I think does show to a certain degree at least a lack of confidence in that leadership. Now, whether that's due to the speed of their reforms, whether that's due to the speed of their implementation, or a lack of loyalty, like you said, we just don't know at this point.
So you talk about lack of confidence, and also it may be a way of showing symbolism. So Wen-Ti, moving on to you, what is your assessment of the personnel reshuffling that happened within the PLA's rocket forces? Some people say that maybe it's due to the leaked organizational information or deployment maps to the United States. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think just to play out the points that Vincent raised earlier, I actually think that if I were Xi watching what happened to Wagner Group and the mutiny in Russia, my first reaction would be, it could happen here, right? So I believe it was June 23rd, 24th, thereabout, when the mutiny happened in Russia. 3 days later, by June 27th, you saw the PLA releasing and widely distributing to every PLA soldier this thing called Study Guide on Central Military Commission Chairman's Complete Responsibility, when they say complete responsibility, they really mean complete power, right? That's how they try to drive home the point that civil-military relations under Xi Jinping, there has to be absolutely no wiggle room there. They have to be absolutely loyal to Xi. But the fact that they even try to drive home and re-emphasize this message shows that they think there may be a slight potential for a crack somewhere. Otherwise, why bother, right? So I think that's point one. And point two is that you see from speech after speech by Xi Jinping at Politburo study session, at other public venues, he's been complaining about this thing he calls 两面人, two-sided man or two-sided humans, if you will, which is this notion that whenever top-level leaders issue a directive, the mid-round, mid-tier leader will say yes to the leader's face, and then when they go back to the military barracks, when they go back to their defense ministry buildings, they begin to twist it, they begin to either water it down, or they try to, overcompensate to demonstrate loyalty. In a way that's actually proved to be detrimental to the overall interests of China or the CCP as a whole. So again, you see complaints as well as remedial measures like the study guide I mentioned earlier, which both tell me that Xi, like Vincent said, it remains, even in this state of almost complete power centralization, that Xi still remains concerned about the degree of its control over the military side, which is why you start seeing all these personnel reshuffling in the military.
So talking about the personnel reshuffling, and it has come to attention that Wang Houbing, who has now holds the position of commander of the rocket forces. If we look at his background, he has a naval background and he doesn't seem to have a lot of experiences with the rocket forces. But why is he chosen by Xi Jinping to serve this important post?
I'll start by saying this. I think there's a lot of growing overlap between what the PLA Navy does and what the rocket forces do, because we have to understand the rocket forces aren't just nuclear in nature. I mean, they also encompass China's shore-based missile launchers as well, and their engagements on missile defense, and as well as their engagements on A2AD. And so I think there is a naval role for that to play. But I do think it goes back to the point you had made earlier, which is why the sudden change, right? Why the sudden change? And so I do think of it like this. So China is doing a couple of things. And again, this is an area that has been underreported upon. I mentioned earlier, you have 20 fixed ICBM silos. You're increasing that to over 300 at this point. You're bringing on board the new Dongfeng 41s, which are 3 multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, which are enormously difficult to defend against. You're increasing your warheads from 400 to about 1,500 by 2035, which is going to be parity with US and Russia. And you're doing all of these actions unbeholden to any kind of agreement, international agreement, like Russia and US have New START. Right? Well, at least, they sort of still have these agreements in place. But my point is China's not beholden to any of them. And so they could do any of this without any of the sort of international limitations that other countries face. And so the point I wanted to draw was that you're moving forward on this reform massively fast. You're doing a lot here. And so this leadership change at this point, again, I still think it's 2 points. One of them is potentially a lack of confidence in the current leadership, but the second one is to maybe rethink about how to push forward on these reforms as fast as possible to show the world symbolically that the rocket forces have a role to play in a Taiwan contingency scenario. And so this is why I think we should be following these developments very closely.
Wen-Ti.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Vincent just said, and I think that emphasis on increasing joint warfare or joint warfighting capacity between different services of the military, I think is the direction Xi Jinping is trying to push towards. So obviously there's the rocket forces, the new commander-in-chief is coming from the Navy, and the new political commissar comes from the Air Force. So in a way, you are bringing expertise from 2 other services into the rocket forces. Presumably as a direction, as a way, a move towards greater inter-agency, inter-service coordination capacity, presumably for increasing battle readiness. I think that's one direction. Another direction is that, factionally speaking, obviously if you bring in people from other services who don't have existing personnel networks, who don't have previous supervisors or previous subordinate in the rocket forces, these 2 top leaders of the rocket forces, their political fortune will be tied almost entirely to their loyalty towards the top leader, because that's the only person who can cover them politically inside the rocket forces. This again goes back to the consolidating siege control of the rocket forces point. One thing I'll add as well is the new commander. The new commander is 63 years old, which means that not only is he from the Navy and therefore had little personnel network inside the rocket forces, but also he's only 2 years away from retirement. So for the new commander, I think two words will characterize his reaction toward this new appointment, and that'll be he'll be super thankful to the leader for extending his retirement age with this new promotion. And second word is that he's likely to be a transitional figure there as well, which again opens up more room for Xi to appoint new other leaders down the road who will be even more loyal to him than if you promote within the ranks of the rocket forces itself.
Also, a better way for Xi to even more centralize his powers with the military.
That's a broader direction, I think so. And also the new political commissar as well. The guy is a lot younger. He's only 61, meaning he has more years to serve. Also, it's very unusual in that usually the commander is equal or perhaps slightly more senior than the political commissar. This time it's different. This time the political commissar is not only younger, but he's actually inside the central committee. He's a full member of the central committee, i.e. one of the top 200 leaders inside China, while the commander is not. This again points to this broader direction, I think, of analysis that tells you that this commander they have now is more transitional in nature.
Yes. So my next question is, we are talking about the PLA's rocket forces. What kind of threat can it pose to Taiwan and US or even to the world?
Well, I think that as they're looking at the lessons from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, they see nuclear deterrence as effective. And they've seen that in the West, particularly in NATO, they've been quite, I think, concerned about escalatory natures that could lead to a nuclear response by Russia. And Russia has, in a way, effectively welded that this threat. I mean, they've on multiple different occasions come out and said, well, you know, certainly this is something that we think about. Certainly this is something that, you know, that could be utilized in defense of our motherland and so forth. And I think for China, they're looking at all of these lessons learned, and they're looking at particularly, I think, Western democracies and their aversion to nuclear threat because of past history. And so how that could be welded effectively as not only a weapon, but also as a deterrent against intervention by other countries in support of Taiwan, I think is one thing that the PLA will look very intensely at, the CCP will look at. I think one other area that they would also look at is how they can utilize this to give them more effective geostrategic power, particularly here in the region. And again, it's no secret, and it's not a surprise that they're going to reach parity with Russia and U.S. And Russia and U.S. in the past history of the Cold War, but beyond, has used these nuclear warheads as geostrategical leverage in the past. And China certainly is moving in that direction as well. And so when they all achieve 1,500 warheads, I think that all gives them geostrategic parity, at least in the nuclear realm, to a certain extent. And so that's what I think what China is thinking about as well.
In addition to the unfolding events surrounding the PLA's rocket force, it has come to light that China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang has been removed from his position with no public appearances recorded over the past month. Despite maintaining the title of State Councilor, Wang Yi has replaced Qin Gang as China's Foreign Minister. This development underscores the discrete and intricate nature of China's political system, an aspect we will examine in greater detail for subsequent discussion. So now, Vincent, my question for you is that after serving as China's foreign minister for only 6 months, Qin Gang was relieved of his duty without any public explanation, and analysts posit that this incident underscored the lack of transparency in the Chinese political system, and this may compromise China's national image. What is your take on this sudden removal? And do you think that this shows that Xi Jinping is concerned with the regime stability?
Qin Gang was actually seen as somebody that was very close to Xi Jinping, and his career was on a skyrocket so fast. I mean, he was he had come to DC. He was spokesman before. He was head of this their information department in terms of public information, and he was seen as this new breed of wolf warrior diplomats that could effectively represent China's interests on the world stage. And so actually a few people in DC were a bit apprehensive about him coming here. But he came to DC, and I think he largely, did not break too much China in the shop, and he was largely, I think, consistent with past practice. But then he was recalled back a year after to be foreign minister, which again showed this spaceship that he was on.
A huge jump, right?
A huge jump. I mean, you have to remember that the last ambassador to U.S. Cui Linkai was there for almost a decade. I mean, he was there for years. And for Qin Gang to go back after 1 year showed that he had Xi Jinping's graces and that Xi Jinping did have other plans for him. And for him to suddenly disappear like that, I think it not only shows, again, the fragility and the lack of confidence that Xi Jinping currently has in the whole system right now, but it also shows to a certain degree kind of arbitrariness and the fact that I think Xi Jinping can wield this arbitrariness like a weapon to say that people who don't fall in line, people who do things that are outside accepted bounds can be immediately replaced and scrubbed from the website like you never existed. And so that, I think, is also meant to be a warning to others within the CCP itself that you need to stay in line or you could end up like Qin Gang. And so again, I think there's internal message at play, but I also think there's external message at play. And I think both of these factors are driving consideration of Qin Gang right now. And to be honest, the $1 million question on any show right now is actually, where is Qin Gang? Nobody knows.
Okay, so Wen-Ti, now my question for you. As mentioned by Vincent, we do see that Qin Gang climbed the career ladder in such a fast speed. But now, well, of course, in addition to the question of where he is, he was handpicked by Xi Jinping, and he is also personally dismissed by Xi Jinping. So what's the relationship between the two?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Qin Gang's career took 2 straight promotions within a span of about 5 months or so between 2022 and 2023 would definitely indicate that he's favored by the top leader. Otherwise, something that's so unconventional would not have happened to start with. So I think what happened with Qin Gang may potentially be a case where Xi Jinping feels like foreign minister is meant to be the one that earns face for China. And at this juncture, given so much scandal, or at least rumors surrounding Qin Gang, he's really not being a plus, has not been an asset there in terms of the earning face for China department. And that's why, even though Qin Gang was strongly favored by Xi Jinping, and that may be one reason why he still get to keep his state councilor position for this juncture, but his foreign minister position got removed and reappointed to Wang Yi instead. Because if you think about all these different meetings China has going on, right? All these foreign ministers meeting with almost 200 countries in the world, ahead of APEC, G20, all these multilateral meetings, you have preparatory meetings beforehand between foreign ministers. Every single inter-foreign minister meeting that Qin Gang is supposed to go to, and instead they got Wang Yi to go, is a stark reminder to the rest of the world that China doesn't seem to have a normal functioning working foreign minister, and it's going to be, again, making China look rather unbecoming of the world's second superpower. And I think that's why you are seeing such unprecedented move made both before Qin Gang's promotion to foreign minister and very soon afterwards now what happened to the very removal of that position.
I'll quickly add, and I always thought it's interesting because really China has a dual foreign minister system because they also have the head of foreign external relations for the CCP, which is also a member of the State Council, which previously was Yang Jiechi and is currently held by Wang Yi right now as well. And so actually, when I was in the US, one idea that had been floated in policy communities was that actually the Secretary of State's counterpart isn't the foreign minister, it's the State Councilor, because he is the one that actually calls the shots, whereas the foreign minister carries them out in terms of execution. And so again, it's not a huge change in the sense that Wang Yi was already the state councilor. He already ran foreign policy. He had to run foreign policy in the past. And now he's suddenly subsumed Qin Gang's portfolio. And so he brings it under the same roof. But again, I do think it goes to show the fragility of the entire CCP system and the messiness of it too, when you have essentially 2 heads of what should be really a unified command on foreign affairs.
So my question is, I think a lot of people are curious why Qin Gang is removed. Some people say that it's because of his personal behavior, or there are rumors because for whatever reason. And some people link that the removal of the PLA rocket forces, some people say it's due to corruption. But if we put all of these items together, it shows that China is really facing some problems internally, whether it's in military or diplomacy, especially as mentioned by Wen-Ti. Now there are a lot of meetings coming up, G20 and APEC. What should China do to restore its diplomatic standing? Wen-Ti.
There are probably many things China should be doing, but to start off with, I think they need to find a way to reduce the level of opacity around the system. Because, I mean, for now, for example, people don't even know like who exactly is running the show on foreign affairs in China right now. Like, who should I be having dialogue with? Who would be my usual channel of communication if I want to find someone to talk about important matters with? Right, without this basic level of clarity, you cannot really have anything near a regularized channel of communication from which, and without it, you cannot really have meaningful trust building. That's all that is important for sustained cooperation between nations. And that's, I think that's especially meaningful for a state like the PRC with, like Vincent said earlier, for example, they already have a dual track system where you have a party state. The party's 中办主任, the party's Central Foreign Affairs Office director is usually a more senior person to the equivalent foreign minister in the state council, i.e. in the cabinet. That's already confusing enough for the rest of us. But even if you go to not just the civilian diplomacy part, you go to the defense diplomacy part, this again, if we go back 2 years ago, we remember America's Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, for example. He was complaining when the Biden administration first started that the Lloyd Austin was complaining that he really shouldn't be talking to China's defense minister. Rather, he should be talking to China's deputy. Central Military Commission chairman. All this kind of confusion, all this basic energy wasted on protocols even, is one reason I think why China diplomacy hasn't been as effective as it could be.
Yes,
well,
Vincent.
just to add, Betty, I think they're just being more honest now. So in the past, you see a lot of these shuffles, and all of this would be blamed on anti-corruption. This would be part of the anti-corruption campaign. You know, we found houses somewhere, we found offshore bank accounts. Now they just don't even bother with this explanation. It's just like, I'm just going to switch whoever I feel like switching. The arbitrariness of the PRC system, the CCP, has always been there. I mean, in the past, I think they've disguised this as an anti-corruption measure. Now they're just past the disguises. They just don't care anymore.
So my question for both of you, now Wang Yi becomes foreign minister again, right? How will that impact the relation, maybe China's relations with Taiwan or even with the US? Any difference or?
I think Wang Yi brings a set of steady hands.
Okay.
And Wang Yi knows many counterparts around the world, and I think he has a track record of very intense pressure on Taiwan's international space. So I don't think this is a positive development, but certainly it's something that we'll continue to watch.
Wen-Ti.
Yeah, I think Wang Yi's first reaction when he hears about a new appointment will probably be something like, I'm too old for this stuff.
Again?
He's been doing it for a good 10 years.
But I don't want to disappear either, so I'll take the show.
I just do whatever my boss tells me, right?
But yeah, I mean, if you look at Wang Yi, though, he's really well beyond the normal retirement age for a cabinet level official, and that includes foreign minister / state councilor position that's affiliated with foreign minister. So I think that gives us a signal that his appointment as foreign minister may be a transitional arrangement again as well, probably as a way to get all other potential candidates who all want to become the next foreign minister. It's a way to tell them to chill for now. Stop wasting our energy on fighting over the positions. It's not going to happen before we figure out what exactly to do with Qin Gang's other state councilor position. But if you're a foreign country, you're trying to deal with China, you're like, really another transitional figure? Then do I have to wait another 2 years or whatever number of years until I can find someone regular I can talk with to work stuff out with? So this again is going to likely have a discount effect on China diplomatic outreach.
Thank you so much. If you like our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe on our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.